The Terrifying Lies Podcast, with music and stories by Craig Nybo. Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Terrifying Lies Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nybo. Thank you for joining me on this journey through strange stories and eerie music. In a world filled with turbulence, I want to extend a message of peace. Life throws storms at us all. But I hope this podcast can be a small refuge, a moment of distraction, a spark of wonder. Whatever you're facing, I wish you strength and calm. And let me say thank you for lending me your time. Your support means everything. Whether you're a longtime listener or just jumping in, you are the heartbeat of this show. And now let's take a step into the unknown together. Before we dive into today's story, a quick note. If you haven't listened to the earlier parts of this story, I encourage you to go back and catch up. Trust me, it'll make more sense that way. This is part 7 of 13. To get you up to speed, here's where we're at. Twana Birch, superfan extraordinaire, witnessed the unthinkable. The murder of her idol, Bieber. Not to be confused with anyone by that name in real life. A car bombing took him from the world. But Twana wasn't ready to let him go. Using her brother Butch's mob connections, she convinced Orlando DiPescio, a cloning kingpin, to bring Bieber back. Her plan? Teach the clone to sing, to dance, to rise again as the universe's ultimate star. But nothing's ever simple. DiPescio is under investigation, and he's ordered the hit on both Twana and Bieber's clone. What Twana doesn't know is her brother Butch is stowed away on the space bus, watching over her like a silent guardian. And now we continue the saga with Rock and Roll and Resurrection, Bieber's Finger, part 7 of 13. The laundry hamper wheels rattled as Butch pushed it out of the service elevator and down the long hallway that led to the incinerator room. When Butch had first stowed away on the flight, after procuring a maintenance uniform, he'd searched the ship from bow to stern. He'd noticed the incinerator as a tool he might later need. The incinerator room doors hissed open and he pushed the laundry hamper through. The device worked on flash heat technology. The burners all but instantly charred to ash any object that dropped inside from a complicated network of garbage chutes. Conveyors then conducted the ash to a storage tank in the belly of the space bus for later disposal. With so many passengers, the incinerator functioned almost constantly. Butch pushed the laundry hamper up next to the incinerator and punched a big green manual override button to stop it from burning incoming waste. He twisted the latch mechanism and pulled the gigantic metal door open. It yawned on noisy hinges as he tugged it wide. He uncovered Fuchs's body in the hamper. As a lifeless corpse, Fuchs appeared to be at peace. He bent at the knees and worked the body out of the laundry cart up over his shoulder. He pushed to a standing position. Fuchs's arms and legs dangled unhinged. The body felt 4 times heavier than it should have been. He winced as he moved toward the incinerator. He sat Fuchs's bottom on the edge of the opening and righted him, keeping one hand on each of Fuchs's shoulders. Fuchs seemed to look at the ground, his eyes still open in death. Butch used one hand to close them while he steadied the weight with the other.
"You'd better pray for mercy,"
Butch said, then gave Fuchs a light shove. The corpse cantilevered backwards into the incinerator. It hit so hard that Butch grimaced in sympathetic pain.
"Mr. Pinback,"
a voice came from the incinerator room entrance. Butch wheeled around to face Jeff Stacks.
"What is it that brings you down to the incinerator room?"
Jeff entered the hot chamber, taking a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe the sweat from his brow.
Just a load of old linens that needs to be burned,"
Butch said the first thing that came to his mind.
"Is Mendel's co-opting your time again?"
Jeff said, moving up next to the laundry cart and looking down at the piles of towels, bed sheets, and pillowcases in the hamper.
"You know, you don't work for the laundry crew. I gotta have you on the ball in maintenance from shift up to shift down."
"I'm just doing him a favor,"
Butch said. He bent into the cart and lifted out as many linens as he could and tossed them into the incinerator, trying to cover Fuchs. He succeeded for the most part, but one of Fuchs's booted feet protruded from the bottom of the pile of linens.
Well, at least it's good to see that you're putting in your time.
Protocol.
Butch said, picking up another load of linens and throwing them into the incinerator. He missed Fuchs's boot again.
That's right. Protocol.
Jeff managed to squeeze out a thin smile.
Tell you what, let me give you a hand with this little favor from Mendel's, and you can get back to your list. I'll need to have another chat with the director of the laundry about the clear division and responsibilities between our departments.
It's okay. I got it.
Butch said, taking another load of towels out of the cart.
Nonsense.
Jeff bent into the cart and drew out an armload of linens. He moved to the incinerator opening and glanced inside. He stopped cold. Butch held his breath.
You know, this is an amazing machine,
Jeff said.
All that trash flashed to ash, a fraction of its former volume.
He tossed the linens into the incinerator. Butch began to breathe again. He threw another load into the incinerator while Jeff hefted another armload out of the hamper. Load by load, they tossed the linens inside. When they were finished, Jeff slammed the door and wound the latch shut.
Would you like to do the honors?
Jeff said, pointing at the large red manual fire button.
Be my guest.
Butch said. Jeff balled up his fist and punched the button. The incinerator churned to life. A whoosh of flash heat filled the chamber, turning the small window in the reinforced door into a momentary blinding light. Jeff interwove his fingers and cracked his knuckles.
That's that. Time to get back to it and watch the favors for Mendel's. If you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. Next thing you know, he'll have you shining guest shoes and pressing shirts.
I'll stick to the list.
Butch said.
Protocol.
Jeff said.
Protocol.
Butch repeated. As Jeff Stacks left the incinerator room, Butch mopped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. He waited for his boss to move out of sight. Then he pushed the laundry cart to the nearest maintenance storage area and ditched it. He headed to the service elevator and hit the button that would take him to the main deck. He had to get back to Twana's room. Jakes wouldn't hesitate on orders from DePeccio. Bieber sang and danced in the middle of cabin 319. The girls sat on the lower bunk and watched him work his way through his repertoire. They smiled and bounced to the beat, coming from Twana's portable stereo. Even though they'd been at it for hours, refining Bieber's act for the Sapphire Lounge talent show, neither Twana nor Mindy Lee tired of watching him perform. As Stand reached its climax, Bieber punched out the chorus with all the fan love he could muster, making eye contact with Twana and Mindy Lee in turn as he delivered the lyrics. Twana had taught him that technique.
Try to look every single girl in the whole place right in the eye. Try to convince them that you really care. That's what Bieber used to do,
she had said. The effect worked perfectly. Even there in cabin 319 with just the three of them, as the clone locked eyes with her, Twana felt old twinges of infatuation for Bieber bloom in her heart. Bieber ended the song down on one knee, elbow on his thigh, chin in his hand. He flashed a well-rehearsed smile up at the girls. The track ended with a 2-bar percussive finish. The cabin went silent. Both the girls sat with their mouths open. Mindy Lee squealed and clapped her hands.
You're just like him. I can't believe it. You become Bieber.
Twana folded her arms and nodded in approval.
You're gonna kill him tomorrow night.
She said.
And you're gonna kill him at the Pan-Galactic Prom Show, too.
Bieber pumped his fist and stood up. He did a little turn with his hands above his head, causing both girls to laugh. Someone knocked at the door. Everyone went quiet.
Room service,
a man's voice said from the hallway. Twana and Mindy Lee looked at each other.
Did you order pizza?
Twana asked.
Who didn't?
Twana said. She stood up and moved to the door. She twisted the knob and pulled it open.
I think there might be a mistake. We didn't order anything.
The man in the hall, short with blue eyes, was dressed in a dark suit. He didn't look much like an Intertran employee.
Nevertheless,
he said,
I got something for you.
Jakes pushed the door with such force that Twana backpedaled into the cabin. She screamed. Bieber picked up a bedside lamp and smashed Jakes in the face. The lamp shattered, scattering glass all over the floor. With a face full of shards, Jakes momentarily lost his equilibrium. Mindy Lee shoved Jakes out into the hall and tried to slam the cabin door, but Jakes rammed a toe into the jamb. He yelped as Mindy Lee slammed the door on his foot. Both Bieber and Twana joined Mindy Lee, pushing the door from inside the cabin. Although the three of them worked together, they couldn't shut Jakes out. Jakes pounded and kicked from the outside. Inch by inch, he shouldered the door open in micro measures.
You might as well let me in. I'm gonna take you down one way or another. Better to make it quick.
Jakes said. Butch rounded the corner up the hall from cabin 319 in time to see Jakes attempting to force his way into his sister's room. Still dressed in his maintenance uniform and just back from incinerating Fuchs, Butch leaned into a sprint down the hall. Jakes was too busy with the door to notice Butch's bull rush. Butch came at him shoulder first. The two men went tumbling away from the door, an entanglement of feet and fists to the hallway floor. Twana's cabin door slammed shut behind them, and Butch felt relieved when he heard both the deadbolt and chain engage from inside the room. Butch used Jakes' momentary discombobulation against him. He punched Jakes in the face as many times as he could, bloodying the contract killer's nose and splitting his lip in the bargain. Jakes groped with stupid arms to block the punches. Butch landed a hard right cross, then pushed to a standing position. He kicked Jakes a half dozen times in the ribs. Jakes finally rolled free and sprung to his feet, shaking off the effects of the bludgeoning. Butch snatched a radio handset from his belt and raised it to his lips.
Security, this is Pinback. I've got an incident in the cheap seats just outside of cabin 319.
He reached into his pocket and took out the steak knife he had stolen from the kitchen. A voice came back over the radio stating that officers had been dispatched and were en route. Butch knew that Jakes wouldn't hesitate to kill him, so he gripped down hard on the knife handle and moved in. Butch lunged at Jakes, but the man was too fast. He deflected the knife with his forearm and punched Jakes in the face. Butch took a couple of stumbling backward steps. As he recoiled, he felt Jakes whisk the steak knife from his hand. Knowing what was coming next, Butch backed off as quickly as his wits would allow, but he was too slow. Jakes buried the knife in Butch's shoulder. It could have been worse. If Butch had hesitated even for another second, Jakes would have driven the knife into his chest. Butch ducked back, shook it off, and raised his fists.
Why are you always getting in my way?
Jakes said, settling into a trained fighting stance.
I'm not gonna let you hurt him.
Butch said, backing off a couple of steps, keeping his fists up. There was a maintenance closet just a few feet away. Step by step, he moved toward the door.
You're gonna die now, you know. Nobody crosses Tepesio and lives.
That may be so.
Butch said, finally reaching the maintenance closet. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the sound of running feet. Security was on the way.
But that day isn't gonna be today.
Butch opened the maintenance closet, leapt inside, and slammed the door.
Hey, you!
Someone up the hall shouted. Butch heard Jakes take to his heels and run away. The footfalls of security guards pounded by as they gave chase. Butch worried for the security guards' safety should they corner Jakes. He waited in the maintenance closet until all was quiet. He opened the door and checked both ways. With nobody in sight, he ducked into the hall and walked away from cabin 319. With Jakes occupied, Twana would be safe at least for a little while, but Butch reckoned that no underpaid security guards, no matter how big they were, could take Jakes down. Butch had to regroup and formulate some kind of a plan, or he, his sister, and the blonde girl, and the clone would all be dead sooner than later. After several minutes of silence from the hall, Twana unbolted the cabin door and peered out. The corridor seemed undisturbed. Mindy Lee stood back in the room with one hand over her mouth and the other on Butch's shoulder.
They're gone.
Twana said.
Security took him away.
Who was he?
Mindy Lee asked.
I don't know. Crazy fan? Someone after Bieber's royalties?
Tepesio? She didn't say the mobster's name out loud. Why would Tepesio send someone after her and Bieber? Hadn't they made a deal? Has something gone wrong back on Earth?
What about the talent show?
Mindy Lee asked. Twana gently pushed the cabin door closed. She stood with her back to Mindy Lee and Bieber for a contemplative moment, resting her forehead against the door. Then she turned around.
The show must go on,
she said. Mindy Lee's face peeled into a gigantic grin.
Like I said, security carted him off. Sure, we'll need to be careful, we'll need to watch our backs, but there's something more important in play here than our safety. The show must go on.
Mindy Lee clapped her hands in glee. Bieber smiled and punched a fist into his open palm. Twana folded her arms and nodded, smirking in defiance. But she wondered, in the back of her mind, how security had been able to react so quickly to the situation. The maintenance workers' locker room smelled like disinfectant. Butch sat on a bench in the very back of the room where he could work without interruption. His shoulder ached. After leaving cabin 319, he had gone to the nearest laundry room for supplies. He'd covered the stab wound on his shoulder with enough linens from the laundry cart to control the bleeding. Now, with the linens off and the top half of his coveralls unzipped and pooling around him on the bench, he sponged fluid away from the puckering cut with a fresh towel. He picked up the needle and thread that he had procured from the laundry room and held it to the light.
This is gonna hurt,
he thought. Grimacing as he worked, he stitched the wound up, working the needle in and out of the skin, using his left hand to pinch the opening together. He didn't worry about scarring. He'd won plenty of scars already in his career. He just wanted to get it over. He needed to get back to his sister. He felt he had won enough time to at least see to his injury, but it wouldn't be long before Jakes made another move and Butch couldn't afford not to be there. The metal door to the maintenance room opened and closed. Butch looked up from his work, clenching his jaw as someone entered. Butch hurried his stitching, working the needle in and out as quickly as he could, wincing with every prick. Before he could finish, someone came round the corner and stood at the end of the alley of lockers. Butch looked to see Jeff Stacks. He put his fists on his hips and stared at Butch. At first, angry, but as he recognized what it was Butch was doing, his jaw dropped and his hands fell to his sides. He moved in closer, carefully, as if he was investigating a crime scene. Thoroughly caught in the act, Butch decided to continue stitching his shoulder. There's no point in hiding it now.
What happened?
Jeff said. Butch said the first thing that came to mind.
A broken mirror in one of the cheap seat cabins. I caught an edge while I was cleaning it up.
I didn't hear anything about a broken mirror,
Jeff said.
That was no big deal. I took care of it. I found a replacement mirror and supplies and hung it myself. Everything is cool.
Jeff watched Butch finish the last stitch, shaking his head in consternation.
You know, we have a sick bay. You need to get that taken care of by a doctor.
It's no big deal,
Butch said.
I didn't want to trouble anybody. Besides,
Butch pulled his orange coveralls up over his naked shoulders and zipped it to his neck.
who has the time to stand in line behind a bunch of sick passengers, jonesing for prescription-grade dimenhydrinate?
Jeff chuckled, although he didn't know what dimenhydrinate was.
I admire your resources, and I love a self-starter, but I need you to get to sickbay right away and have them look at that shoulder.
Okay, boss.
You know, we have protocols when it comes to worker injuries. It isn't just a matter of bucking up and leaning through it.
I understand.
There's a bigger picture than you on board this ship, and within the organized structure of Intertran, should that wound go south, should the worst happen, maybe you get gangrene, guess who picks up the tab? And, by the way, guess who has to pay the settlement on the lawsuit?
Butch blinked.
That's right,
Jeff went on.
Intertran, that's who.
I'll visit sickbay.
Butch said.
Very good.
Jeff turned and walked away. Just before he left the locker alley, he stopped and put a hand on the wall and looked over his shoulder at Butch.
You know, Pinback,
He said.
I've seen employees do some extreme things to try to get out of work.
Butch bit on his bottom lip and stopped himself from saying anything he might regret.
Did you know that the lead chef had to fire one of his staff because he dipped his hand in a deep fryer just to get out of work?
I didn't know that.
It's true. He spent the rest of his flight in sickbay where they treated him for burn wounds and will probably be with him the rest of his life. You know what I have to say about that?
What's that?
I have to say good riddance. If an employee can't keep his end of the deal by following protocol and putting in honest days of work, I say fire them. I have no use for slackers, even if they go to the extreme and deliberately injure themselves just to get out of work.
Don't worry, boss. I'll be right back out on the floor. You won't see any slack in my performance.
Jeff smiled and patted the wall of lockers next to him a couple of times.
Good man. That's what I want to hear. Work hard and follow protocol, and you'll never have anything to worry about.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent.
Jeff nodded, resolute.
Good talk. I have a busy day stacked up, so I have to run, but I'm confident you'll do the right thing.
Butch raised a fist in solidarity and accompanied it with a stiff nod. Jeff smiled and left. Butch swore under his breath as he stood from the bench. He tossed the bloody towels, the needle, and the rest of the spool of thread into the trash as he left the locker room. He tried his arm out, rotating it around a couple of times. It hurt, but he didn't think his stitches would tear out. He had enough mobility to defend himself when he ran into Jake's. Butch sloshed a mop back and forth over probably the cleanest section of floor in the space bus. Stroke by stroke, he worked his way up the hall until he reached his sister's cabin door. He looked both ways to make sure there were no witnesses and put his ear to the door. He'd grown used to hearing Bieber's music, to hearing thumping and singing as Twana and her friend taught Bieber how to be a pop star. But this time he only heard silence. His blood cooled. He imagined Twana, the blonde girl, and the clone, all lying on the bunk inside, their throats slashed by Jake's. He glanced up and down the hall again and pulled an Allen wrench and a bobby pin he had found out of his pocket. He crouched down and worked the tumblers in the door's lock. He pushed the door open and entered the room all at once. He closed it behind him and panned the cabin. No dead bodies. He breathed a sigh of relief. He sniffed the air. Traces of Twana's perfume, something called August Love, a Bieber scent, permeated the cabin. It was funny. Since stowing away on the space bus, Butch had spent every waking hour tracking Twana, watching her from afar. But even with her in his constant sights, he missed her. He wanted to just walk to her and say hi, but he couldn't afford to blow his cover. It was better for Twana not to know what was going on around her. He didn't want her to fall into DePeccio's world, and so he would remain her invisible guardian angel for as long as he could. As Butch turned to leave the cabin, he noticed a flyer sitting on the bottom bunk, a bright leaflet marked with big stars and gigantic, elegant lettering. He picked it up and read it. The flyer advertised an Intertran space bus-wide talent show. "Do you have the stuff to be a star?" the flyer read. Butch's heart rate shifted up as he read through the rest of the notice. The talent show started in an hour, and that dumb sister of his was planning on going public with her clone. Butch put the flyer down and left Twana's cabin. He had to get to the Sapphire Lounge.
In the atmosphere, yeah, baby. No
Today's song pushes the narrative forward with the theme of love in the vast reaches of space. It's a tale of a young man inviting his love to dance among the stars. For this season, I've taken on a challenge, writing songs as though I'm part of Bieber's band. Of course, not to be confused by anyone by that name in real life. It's bright, cheery synth pop, a world I rarely wander into. But I've always loved stepping out of my comfort zone, trying something new in both my music and my writing. Am I a pro in this genre? Probably not. But I'm having a blast, and I hope you're enjoying the ride with me. This song is called Zero Gravity. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Terrifying Lies podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave a review and subscribe. Helps more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts on this episode or just drop me a note. You can find me on Facebook or email me at craiglnibo@gmail.com. I read every message and respond to each one. Until next time, I bid you sweet dreams. Or should I say, sweet nightmares.
This has been the Terrifying Lies podcast. Please come again. You're welcome here.